Hello, I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache here, and welcome to part 3 of Memory Lane Month. For this re-review, I will be jumping down the rabbit hole with 1933's Alice in Wonderland. So, grab yourself a cup of tea as we go down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland 1933. Looking back, what are my thoughts on Alice in Wonderland 1933? Well, my opinion has not changed since my original review. I still like this movie, and I dare say it has a far better understanding of the original Alice in Wonderland story than the Tim Burton film. Of course, that's just my opinion. That's just me. And for the record, I don't hate Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. The dude's a genius, but I found his version of Alice in Wonderland to be, quite frankly, pretty dull. The film was directed by Norman Z. MacLeod, who directed Marx Brothers' Monkey Business, plus the Marx Brothers' Horse Feathers, and in addition to all that, he directed It's a Gift starring W.C. Fields, as well as Road to Rio, Topper, and Topper Takes a Trip. The dude has quite the impressive resume, and I'm loving it. Alice in Wonderland is an adaptation of Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland through the Looking Glass as well. The film was originally 90 minutes long, but due to poor test screenings, it ended up being trimmed down to 77 minutes. The film was originally going to include the very first appearance of Old Father William on the big screen, but that ended up being cut. Sadly, no footage of this exists. It only exists as a still. When the film finally released in 1933, it was a box office bomb. Critics tore it apart, and it wouldn't be until The Wizard of Oz proved that live-action adaptations of fantasy stories could be successful. Although, despite this movie's utter failure, it did manage to get a second life due to airings on television. Unfortunately, this movie completely missed the VHS era. It wouldn't be until Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, where the 1933 Alice in Wonderland finally got a DVD release. Let us talk about my problems with this film. Normally, I would save this for the end, but instead, I'm going to do it here. While a good chunk of the movie consists of actors in makeup, and it does look impressive, and don't get me wrong, we will be praising it a bit later. I've heard many criticisms that the makeup looks pretty freaking creepy. And with some of them, you do have a point, like the mutton, which looks downright terrifying, and the puddin', which for some reason has legs. How did I never catch that? But at least they look unintentionally creepy, unlike something like Alice 1988. Ugh. Well, let us tackle the first person who gets a ton of criticism, the Duchess. I've seen people say, oh, the Duchess looks creepy and weird. Well, have you seen the Duchess in the 1949 Alice in Wonderland? That looks creepier and weirder than the Duchess in this movie, and the Duchess in the book was already kind of weird looking, so I don't really see much of a point in complaining since this was pretty much par for the course. I've even seen people say that Humpty Dumpty looks creepy. Oh, wow. Humpty Dumpty looking creepy? You know, a character who already looks creepy in animation and in children's books? I'm sorry, but Humpty Dumpty is always going to look weird or creepy because it's an egg with a freaking face. Plus, this isn't even the creepiest Humpty Dumpty out there. Have you seen the Humpty Dumpty in the Kenner Surprise commercial? Or the TurboTax commercial? Or even Mother Goose Rock and Rhyme? Not to say that there's nothing to criticize about the effects. Oh, on the contrary, there is plenty to criticize and nitpick at with the effects. Like this mouse. There are times where you can't even tell if he's a dude in a suit or a puppet. It's not until they get his ass into a teapot where you can actually tell. And there's even a part where you can notice the zipper. Notably, with the White Knight, you can tell that they're using wig balding. And with Humpty Dumpty, there are parts where you can notice where the makeup is. And when Humpty Dumpty opens his mouth, there's another mouth in his mouth. Like a freaking xenomorph from Alien. With the whole croquet game where the Queen and Alice are playing croquet, they're using guinea pigs as the croquet balls, and they use real guinea pigs and also real flamingos. And it's pretty disturbing to look at, although they do treat animals well in other shots, like when Alice is in front of two frogs, and you also see a snail on the opposite side to the caterpillar. I've gotten all of my gripes out of the way, let us commence the gushing. This movie uses an assortment of effects, including puppetry, optical effects to make things look smaller or larger than they are, as well as several other great effects, including and not limited to suit effects and of course makeup effects. all of which look extremely impressive, especially in a day and age where Hollywood is constantly relying on you know what, green screen and CGI. Alice goes through the looking glass into the looking glass room. This version of Alice is pretty much like every other version. She's the normal one reacting to all of the weird stuff happening around her. And she's just along for the ride. This version of Alice is played by Charlotte Henry, who also played Little Bo Peep in the 1934 Babes in Toyland, aka March of the Wooden Soldiers. When Alice goes into the backyard, she sees the white rabbit, who falls down the rabbit hole. She goes after him. You know the story even if you don't know the story. Alice gets locked out, as well as her drinking a drink me bottle, which makes her big. And then she eats the eat me treat, which makes her small. And rinse, repeat, all that jazz. And she falls into a puddle made from her own tears. And then she meets the mouse, who literally has a sail on his tail. Alice goes on to dry land where she meets the dodo bird. And of course, the driest thing she knows is to give her a history lesson. Following her history lesson with the dodo bird, she meets the caterpillar, who is played by Ned Sparks. Here we come to the very first revisiting part of the review. In my original review for this movie, I criticized Alice for, get this, I bet Alice feels like falling through a rabbit hole after that exposition dump she took on the caterpillar. Granted, I had just heard the word dump in a video by Brandon Tennell, and I thought it'd be funny to say the word dump in a video. Yeah, how freaking mature or immature I was back then. Yeah, you could tell that I had no idea what the word exposition even meant. I was a real dodo bird. By the by, for those who don't know, exposition is a literal device that introduces key information to the reader/viewer. For example, a character's background or a setting description, which makes the joke that I made in the original review not only force, but also make no doggone sense. A real dodo bird was I. There really isn't any exposition being said in this scene. Alice is just being a chatterbox. The only information we get is to grow bigger, you have to take one side of the mushroom, and to grow smaller, you have to take the other side. Along the way, Alice sees a frog as well as a fish. And here we come to another juicy revisiting. In the original review, I compared this fish's stutter to Piglet.
Compliment to the Hutches.
But I feel like a more apt comparison should have been Porky Pig. Why? because he's played by Roscoe Eats, who was in the 1932 Freaks, who I'm half convinced was the inspiration for Porky Pig.
She's gonna stay right here.
No, she isn't. I gotta go.
Oh, boy. You're always using that for an excuse, for an alibi.
Oh, son of a gun.
Froggy Boy over here is a nervous wreck, mostly because the Duchess's dishes keep flying right out the door and onto his head. He's played by Sterling Holloway, and this would not be the last time he entered Wonderland, as he was the Cheshire Cat in Disney's Alice in Wonderland. The baby's crying, the dishes are flying, and it is pure madness in this joint. It's a madhouse! A madhouse! The Duchess hands the baby over to Alice, who oinks all the way until he turns into a literal pig. Go away, pig! Be free! As Alice next meets up with the Cheshire Cat, who is grinning and all that. The unexpected, uninvited guest drops in on a tea party. Yes, that tea party, hosted by the Mad Hatter and his associate, the March Hare. The Mad Hatter lives up to his name in that, of course, he's mad. The old chap is played by Edward E. Norton, who was the narrator on Fractured Fairy Tales, a segment featured in the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. Here's another edition of HM's Pointless Fun Facts. Did you know that the Mad Hatter is based off of actual victims of mercury poisoning? Yeah, back in the Victorian era, hats were manufactured with mercury. This has been another edition of HM Fun Facts. Back to the movie. We see that the Mad Hatter has a watch that can tell what time of the day or month it is. Afterwards, she meets the Griffin and his old associate, the Mock Turtle. And what a pity. He has no sorrow and cries quite a lot, and reminisces about his childhood, as well as sings Turtle Soup. The Mock Turtle is played by, you ain't never gonna guess this in a million years, Cary Grant. Yeah, his Girl Friday, North by Northwest, that Cary Grant. And you see him in a film like this, and you could hardly believe it's the same guy. Running, Alice is running with the Red Queen, who is quite delightful. And why shouldn't she be? She's played by Edna Mae Oliver, whose filmography already speaks for itself. Alice meets the twins of Wonderland, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Tweedledum is played by Jack Oakey, who is best known for his appearance starring alongside Charlie Chaplin in The Great Dictator. These two are a couple of little rascals, and while their shtick is funny like real children, they can get on your nerves after a while. they take Alice to a tree and show her the walrus and the carpenter. In my original review, I said that this animated segment was done by Mac Fletcher. Animated by who else? My idol, Mac Fletcher. Which was apparently wrong. Segment was actually animated by Hugh Herman and Rudolph Ising through their animation studio. These two had already made it big with the early Looney Tunes shorts, and they would continue their success with the early MGM animated shorts. This scene ironically inspired Walt Disney's version of Alice in Wonderland. We see the sheep give Alice an egg, which turns out to be Humpty Dumpty. And this version of Humpty Dumpty is a bit of a smart aleck and a wise guy, always giving Alice some remark. He's played by W.C. Fields, who's best known for films like It's a Gift, The Bank Dick, and My Little Chickadee, co-starring alongside Mae West. Alice meets the White Knight, who is quite the gentleman and is very charming, but he still has his weird quirks like any character in Wonderland. He's played by, get this, Carrie Cooper, who is best known for films like Pride of the Yankees, High Noon, and gave us this moment of badassery in Return to Paradise. Looking back on this film, it's pretty damn good for the time it came out, and it's pretty good today. Does it drag in a few spots? Yes. Are the effects quite noticeable in a few areas? Okay, yes. But it's still a pretty good adaptation of Alice in Wonderland and represents the book extremely well, both of them. So I say check this film out. 5 gold stars. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say about Alice in Wonderland 1933. Well, for the next review, for Memory Lane month, I will, let's see, where is that VHS tape? Where did I put the king? There is the Mighty Kong. For next week, for the final installment of Memory Lane month, I will be taking a look at King Kong 1933. I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache, signing off.